Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into what is honestly one of the most unbelievable underdog stories in the entire history of business. We are unpacking the life of Jensen Huang, the absolute visionary behind NVIDIA. If you really want to understand how a company becomes the undisputed backbone of our modern tech world, you've got to look at the foundation it was built on. And let me tell you, this foundation, it wasn't built in fancy boardrooms or at Ivy League networking events. No way. It was built on pure survival, sweat, and just a shocking amount of early adversity. So let's get right into it.
$4 trillion. Just think about that for a second. This is the colossal valuation that NVIDIA is pushing toward in this wild era of artificial intelligence. Today, the biggest tech giants in the world, we're talking Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, they literally cannot function without NVIDIA's GPUs. They are the beating heart of the entire AI revolution. But to truly appreciate the sheer magnitude of this success, we have to look at where the CEO of this $4 trillion juggernaut actually started.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the contrast here is just absolutely staggering. The man currently commanding the most valuable tech ecosystem on the planet, he spent his 10th year on Earth scrubbing toilets in a juvenile reform school. Yeah, you heard that right. Not some elite prep school, a reform school. So how on earth does a middle-class kid end up in that situation? And more importantly, how does an experience like that forge a titanium-level mindset?
Section 1. A foundation of hardship. A chaotic childhood.
To answer how that mindset was forged, we really need to rewind the clock. We've got to step away from the glowing screens and the multi-billion-dollar data centers and look at the chaos of his early life. Because the struggles he faced as a kid weren't just, minor inconveniences. They were foundational hardships. Let's trace this completely chaotic journey. Jensen was born in Taipei, Taiwan, to a middle-class family that deeply valued education. When his dad got an engineering job in Thailand, the family moved to Bangkok. But it was 1973, and the political scene in Thailand was incredibly unstable. Fearing for their future, his parents made the agonizing call to send Jensen and his brother to the US to live with their uncle. But here is the wild twist. His uncle made a massive mistake. He accidentally enrolled Jensen in a boarding school in Kentucky that wasn't a normal school at all. It was actually a juvenile reform school for kids with severe discipline issues. He'd eventually reunite with his parents in Oregon for high school, but those years in Kentucky, they left a permanent mark.
Imagine being a 10-year-old kid having to endure this daily. Under the school's strict rules, he was assigned to clean the school toilets every single day. Meanwhile, his brother was sent to work out on a tobacco farm. And beyond the grueling physical labor, Jensen was just relentlessly bullied by the older, tougher students. He barely spoke any English at the time, which of course only made him a bigger target for mockery. This brutal struggle went on for over a year. But actually, instead of breaking him, this intensely hostile environment forged an unbreakable grit. He learned to just put his head down, do the dirty work, and survive.
And that work ethic literally never left him. Even after making it to Oregon, finishing high school, and discovering a real passion for technology, absolutely nothing was handed to him. While he was studying electrical engineering at Oregon State University, which, fun fact, is where he met his future wife, Lori Mills, he had to pay his own way. How? By working grueling hours at a Denny's restaurant, washing dishes, wiping down tables, doing whatever odd jobs they needed. There was zero ego, just a singular laser focus on doing whatever it took to get to the next step.
Section 2. 30 days to bankruptcy, a fatal misstep.
So let's fast forward a bit past his early jobs at AMD and LSI Logic. It's 1993, and alongside Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem, Jensen founds NVIDIA. Their vision was to build incredibly powerful graphics machines. But if you think the hard times were over, you'd be very wrong. In fact, their very first major product launch almost killed the company entirely, and it's a brilliant example of how one technical misstep can almost wipe you off the map. In 1995, NVIDIA launched their first graphics chip, the NV1. On paper, it was a beast, but NVIDIA made a fatal design choice. They built their chip using a geometry called curved quads. The issue? The rest of the gaming industry, including Microsoft's absolutely crucial DirectX platform, had decided to use triangles. Basically, NVIDIA built a brilliant product for a market that simply did not exist.
And the market's reaction was swift and it was merciless. Game developers completely ignored the NV1. Out of 250,000 chips that NVIDIA manufactured, a staggering 29,000 were returned. It was an absolute commercial disaster. The industry had spoken, and they had violently rejected NVIDIA's vision.
This failure plunged the company straight into the abyss. Suddenly, NVIDIA is staring right over the edge of a cliff into complete bankruptcy. At their absolute lowest point, Jensen looked at the books and realized they had exactly 30 days of funding left. One single month. 30 days until the dream was dead. Everyone was out of a job, and NVIDIA would just become another forgotten footnote in Silicon Valley history.
Section 3. The ultimate comeback. A Sega lifeline.
But this is exactly where Jensen's childhood kicks in. When you've spent your formative years cleaning toilets in a reform school while getting bullied, a business crisis doesn't break you. It activates your survival instincts. And this leads to one of the greatest corporate saves of all time. During this desperate hour, an unexpected lifeline appeared. The gaming company Sega needed an advanced 3D GPU for their Dreamcast console, and they contracted NVIDIA. But in a brutal twist, the project was ultimately canceled. However, because Jensen was so transparent and Sega's leadership really believed in him, Sega actually paid NVIDIA for their work anyway. This injected just enough cash, literally a few months of life support, for NVIDIA to pivot. In 1997, they launched the Riva 128. It was a massive hit, selling 1 million units in just 4 months. Just like that, they were back in the game.
Section 4. Pioneering the AI revolution. Inventing the future. Having survived a near-death experience, NVIDIA didn't just walk safely into the future, they began to sprint. The pace of their innovation just exploded. They realized that to never be at the mercy of the market again, they had to be the ones inventing the future. Just 2 years later, in 1999, they changed the gaming industry forever. They launched the GeForce 256, widely recognized as history's very first true graphics processing unit, or GPU. It was a monumental leap in visual computing. But Jensen, he was already looking decades ahead. He knew these chips could do way more than just make video games look pretty.
So, the absolutely crucial turning point happens in 2006. NVIDIA releases CUDA. This was a software layer that essentially unlocked the GPU. It allowed these massive parallel processors to be used for general computing, not just rendering pixels on a screen. Now, at the time, Wall Street didn't understand it at all, and it cost NVIDIA billions in R&D. But this single visionary leap became the foundational bedrock for everything that was about to happen in artificial intelligence.
The massive vindication came in 2012. Researchers at Toronto University used NVIDIA's GPUs to train an AI model called AlexNet. The results were just mind-blowing. They proved to the entire world that GPUs were the perfect architecture for artificial intelligence. Suddenly, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, everyone needed massive computing power, and NVIDIA was literally the only company standing there ready to provide it. The boom had officially begun.
Section 5. Lessons in Resilient Leadership, Surviving Market Shocks. Now, you might think that once you reach a multi-trillion-dollar valuation, the struggles are over, right? Nope. Business is relentless. Even at the absolute top of the mountain, a leader's resilience is constantly tested by unforeseen shocks. Just look at this recent market panic. When the Chinese AI company DeepSeek launched their low-cost R1 model, claiming they trained it for a fraction of the cost, the market completely freaked out. In a single day, NVIDIA shares plunged by roughly 17%. That is a wipeout of over $500 billion in market value overnight. It was literally one of the biggest single-day losses in U.S. stock market history.
But did Jensen panic? Not at all. His ingrained calm under immense pressure kept the entire company steady. He knew the underlying truth. The world's demand for raw computing power wasn't suddenly fading just because a cheaper model existed. And, of course, he was right. The market quickly realized that AI companies still desperately need massive computing power to train their next-generation models. The demand for NVIDIA GPUs surged even faster, and within months, they recovered every single dollar of that loss, pushing right past that $4 trillion mark.
So if you were building a startup or leading any kind of team, remember this. Jensen Huang's journey teaches us that extreme early hardship isn't a curse. It's the crucible that builds unshakable grit. It teaches you to pivot instantly, without ego, when your product fails, like the NV1. It shows the immense value of looking decades ahead, like inventing CUDA before the AI boom even existed. And most importantly, it teaches you to treat those terrifying near-death business experiences not as failures, but as intense training for the real challenges ahead.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. The boy who was sent away from his family, mocked for his language, and forced to clean toilets became the architect of the AI future. His worst days literally built his best days. So ask yourself, what current struggle, what stressful obstacle in your life right now is quietly building the resilient foundation for your future success? Think about that. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep building.